Welcome to the meditation, mindfulness, and compassion. Oh, she's on an iPad. Okay, cool. Workshop. Yeah, we're recording this. No concerns there. Yeah. And again, we'll be practicing a lot. We'll be doing probably 3 or 4 different meditations, and then we're going to do some yoga postures, just some yin yoga postures, just so you can see what it's like just to do a few postures and feel the practice in the body. And I find that way of practicing meditation is really effective, just because we're in a body. And so sometimes like, meditation can get a little heady, and so we keep it up here and we intellectualize it. The whole idea of meditation is to embody it. We don't want to just think compassion. We want to embody compassion. We don't want to just think mindfully. We want to embody mindfulness, so that we're not just becoming better at meditation. That's not really the point. We can be as good at meditation as we can be, and then if we go out in the world and we're jerks, it doesn't really matter. The idea is to use our cushion as an experimental ground to begin to understand ourselves, so that we can use those tools gained in our sitting practice in our living practice. And that's the whole intention behind meditation. On the cushion, I really encourage people to do a formal meditation practice, because on the cushion, when you sit on your cushion and you sit, there's no escape. You can't distract yourself. It's just you, the cushion, and your mind. And so, there's many talk of, well, hula hooping is my meditation, or somebody actually said that to me once, or yoga is my meditation. But that's not necessarily true. Sure, we can reach flow states in any activity where our mind sort of quiets down and we can do the activity. But without the activity, seeing what's there is really important. Because without the distraction, without some other thing to carry us through, what do we find? And embodiment's a really nice way, or doing something physical, or some type of physical practice like yoga or running or whatever, to experience that state. But eventually we want to try to wean ourselves off being with the only way getting there is through that activity. So we want to get as close to doing nothing as possible. So hopefully in this workshop, there'll be some tools that you gain from this. So let's just sit just for a moment, just a couple minutes. I find this is a really nice way to begin. And no particular technique or anything. I like to do this in the beginning, where there's no technique, there's no method. We're just going to sit for 2 minutes, and then I'll talk about it on the other side. So let's just find a posture. So you might be in a chair, you might be on the ground, on a cushion. You might be, I don't know, whatever, lying down. It really doesn't matter. The idea of sitting on the ground is just to create an alert posture so that we don't fall asleep. So, but if you can stay awake lying down, good for you. I can't. So I sit. And so we just come to whatever posture, and then allow a softening to come to the eyes. It's not necessary to close the eyes. Sometimes that can feel claustrophobic or unsafe for some people. So just allow a softening to come to the eyes. And we want to feel a nice base. So feeling your contact with the ground, with the earth. The seat, possibly the legs, the feet. Feeling that almost a sinking quality, your foundation embedded in the earth. Then out of that foundation, there's a lift of the spine. We don't want an aggressive lift, just a floating, like the spine's full of helium or something. Notice if the shoulders have risen with the spine. See if you can draw the shoulders down. Create a little looseness. And so we're upright, but not uptight. One of my teachers likes to say that. And so there's a loose quality, never rigid. If you find yourself getting rigid, you can just give yourself a little shake. It can be nice. And then let's just take a few deep breaths. So we exhale together. And then inhale the belly, the chest, the rib cage, the shoulders, the head, and then a natural exhale out of the mouth. And again, inhale, belly, rib cage, chest, head, and then we exhale. And again, one more time, inhale. And a natural exhale. With this last exhale, just feel the shoulders soften. I want you to just notice what's happening, what's going on here. Don't feel pressure to do anything particular. Just notice. Rejecting nothing, just simply being with what you find. Nothing good, nothing bad here, just experience. Just open the eyes now. Yeah. And just roll the shoulders, just coming back in. And what did you notice when you do that, when you become quiet like that? Again, we were given no method, just what was your experience with that? Again, we don't have to talk here, but if you want to put something in the chat, you can. There's typically the two things that you notice, maybe, at least in my experience. The first thing is that you might notice that your senses are become a little bit more vivid. Even if the senses are just picking up the mind, you might notice the mind being very busy or something like that, or the sounds become, extra noticeable. Experience just becomes a little bit more vivid. Now, again, the mind can create such a cloud that maybe it didn't become vivid, but sometimes we have an experience of vividness when there's nothing to do. And then the other thing that you may notice, at least I notice, is this. Well, there's an A and a B part here in the mind, so that maybe just the general craziness of the mind. I remember when I first started becoming quiet and noticing, first began to meditate, just noticing how much stuff was going on and how I couldn't decipher really anything at all. The other thing you might notice is that there's a constant narration going on, or a dialogue or a monologue happening where all experience is being narrated, where you're like talking to yourself all the time. That voice that you hear can be an interesting thing to home in on at some point, but now we're just noticing that voice is happening. Sometimes, again, there's two voices. There's a back and forth, maybe even getting slightly argumentative at times. You can argue with yourself. So these things are not just going on when we're paying attention to them, they're constantly going on, even when we're not recognizing them. These inside conversations or monologue or dialogue or narration is constantly happening, and it's influencing our experience all the time until we start to become more aware of it, and then we can start to calm down that voice. And this voice or these conversations have particular beliefs and ideas and values and agendas, and which is pretty interesting when you start to think about it. We're not always making our own decisions consciously. There's all of this unconscious stuff going on that's influencing our behavior all the time. We don't have time to get really super deep into that right now, but this is something that we begin to discover as we start to meditate. How much hidden belief is going on deep in the mind. Sometimes I say that we meditate to get to know and understand what's secretly running our lives. It's true. There's these voices, these beliefs, these things that are just constantly going. And so one of the things we're trying to do is just tease those things out, tease those voices, those influences, those experiences out little by little, so we can start to kind of infuse our mind with intention, with beliefs and values that we want. And so this is why we practice. My favorite definition of meditation is the Tibetan word gom. And gom is G-O-M. And gom just means to become familiar. See meditation as us becoming familiar with our own mind. You can think about, until you are told to notice your mind, you just kind of go along with it. It's just sort of leading you. All of those thoughts and emotions and things are just pulling you in directions all the time. And so we start to get to know those things, those emotions, and start to see how much agency we have over our reactions. And so we begin to respond appropriately to the external environment, rather than just kind of reacting all the time. That's what most people are doing. Just bouncing off. I always think of pinball here. Like we're just bouncing off experience all the time. Rejection, embracing, reacting, all the time. And so when we begin to see and understand what's actually happening, what's running our lives, then we can sort of move through life with a bit more grace. smoothness, intention. So this is why we practice. Another reason that we practice meditation is there's this deep dissatisfaction that many of us experience. This might be extra noticeable now that we're all sort of isolated at home. There's not a lot to do. Maybe there is a lot to do that we've been putting off, like with me, a lot of house projects or whatever. But when we don't have our daily routine and there's not as much distraction, we start to kind of see how distracted we are all the time. And when we don't see how distracted we are all the time, we can sometimes not see this undercurrent of dissatisfaction. The Buddha talked about this in his teaching. His very first teaching was called the Four Noble Truths, and the first noble truth is called dukkha in ancient Pali language, dukkha, which means it's sometimes translated as suffering, but more practically speaking, it is translated as unsatisfactoriness. There's this aspect of life that is never satisfactory. And as soon as we think we've found satisfaction, that satisfaction is very short-lived and we start to seek something else. This is constantly going on the undercurrent of our lives. And so what causes that dissatisfaction is desire, or and desire is not necessarily bad, but clinging to something. We cling to things. The thing I think about a lot is it comes to mind because one of my very first teachers talked about this. He used this this illustration of like iPhones, like you have your iPhone. I'm not one of those people who's very super like has to be on top of technology all the time, but I know people who are, and every time there's a new iPhone, they have to be like that first person to get it. And then they get it. They're one of the first people to get it. And they're satisfied for a period of time. But as that new thing becomes normalized, they're slowly starting to dissatisfied thing. And then the dissatisfaction comes in over time, and the new things announced. There's anticipation, and then you get the thing, and then you're satisfied again. And so it's this constant wave. And this is going on with us all of the time. You know, we're all doing this through Moto Yoga. You might be in a yoga class, and the whole time you're just anticipating the next pose or the end of the pose, or you're anticipating the end of the class. Can I just get through this class? And we're doing this, we're never actually where we are. We're somewhere else. We're always in the future. We're always one step ahead of ourselves. And when we're doing that, we're just constantly dissatisfied. And so what is it that we're seeking? We are seeking that peace that comes from satisfaction. But we'll never find it through things, because things are impermanent and they deteriorate, wear out, and need to be replaced. And so there's this constant filling up all the time. And so where are these expectations coming from? Why is this happening? Are we born with this? Is it something that is just natural to being human? And you know, I would argue that it's a product of our society. It's just something that is ingrained in us, in our society, always needing that new thing, constantly, always needing. You know, it wasn't always this way. It's more all the time. But you know, technology is changing all the time now, and so it's very rapid. It was always there before, but it's getting faster and faster. You know, I remember my grandparents had the same TV from, you know, the early, like the mid 70s, all the way up through till the end. You know, it worked really well. And so we can say that a lot of this dissatisfaction comes from our society. I have a friend who's a meditation teacher, and she was reading this book. And this book, it was a book about climate change, but she was, I guess there were discussions about society and culture and collective beliefs. And she said something really interesting that she kind of discovered through inquiry and meditation and things like this, that a lot of the aspects of herself that she had a hard time accepting, or that she didn't like about herself, weren't actually hers, were beliefs and expectations that were put upon her by society or culture. And you know, we see this all the time. Many of our thoughts circle around these expectations, these needs that are put upon us just from being in the society that we're in. We live in a great society. I'm not saying we don't, but there is this constant need for more, and not everything. In fact, a lot of things that our society promotes aren't necessarily healthy. So I thought that was an interesting point. And so what we really seek are not surface goals or to meet the expectations of society. These are just means to an end. What we are really after is the feeling of relief that comes when the pressure is gone. When the pressure for that new thing, we get it, there's a relief, we can finally relax. So it's that relief, that relaxation that we're looking for. But what if we got rid of that desire for that thing? What if we let go of those expectations? What if we moved to something different, found our ground in a more primordial, more eternal space, where our own inner resources rise to the surface, and that's our satisfaction. Where peace and happiness and that lack of yearning, we live in that space. It's a goal. Again, it's something that we work for. It's not something that we beat ourselves up over not having. This is why we practice. The satisfaction of desire will never, ever happen. As long as we're seeking things, we'll constantly have to feed that beast, feed that monster. And again, if we can learn anything from our current situation, where we're at in this isolation, it's that. It's that something is broken. We have overdeveloped, perhaps, the material aspects of our existence at the expense of deeper emotional and spiritual aspects. And we are paying the price. You might feel it right now. And to see and understand this and to work with it, we have to start right here with us. At least my pattern is to blame others. That's something that I typically do. I think a lot of people do. But I really can't. I can only, work with myself. And so we can't make radical changes in our conditional patterns unless we begin right here and see ourselves exactly where we are. All of the bruises, all of the dirt, all of this. And then once we do this, change will just naturally happen. And this is where mindfulness comes in. And mindfulness it comes from this, again, Pali, ancient Indian language. And the word is sati, and it actually comes from a word that means to remember. Remember, it can mean to remember. So what do we remember? We're remembering where we are. We're here, right now, here. We're not somewhere else. Our mind might want to go other places, and that's kind of how the mind operates, either in the future or the past. We're remembering where we are, here. But then this other aspect of remembering is, you could think of it as opposed to dismembering. So it's like we're gathering all these fragmented aspects of ourselves and remembering them into this one place. This is also what yoga means. Yoga means to bring into union, to bring all of these fragmented parts together right here in the moment. So to remember, sati, mindfulness, that's what this is, to gather the mind. And so this is our responsibility. This is how we can live better in the world. There's this ancient Buddhist book called the Dhammapada. It's just short phrases of the Buddha, just very little pith sayings. And like this quote from it, it says, "What you are now is the result of what you were." So we're all the product of our conditioning. We're all right now, we are the result of everything we've done or everything that's happened to us. We've been conditioned. We're conditioned being here. What we are now is the result of what we were. What you will be tomorrow will be the result of what you are now. And so if we want to make change in the future, we have to start here and now. That's the only way. That's the only way. We can't get around it. There's no magic here. We have to do the work here now. The consequences of the consequences of an evil mind will follow you like the cart follows the ox that pulls it. Evil meaning not like the devil, but unskillful mind. No one can do more for you than your own purified mind. No parent, no relative, no friend, no one. A well-disciplined mind brings happiness. Let me read that again. So what you are now is the result of what you were. What you will be tomorrow will be the result of what you are now. The consequences of an unskillful mind will follow you like the cart follows the ox that pulls it. The consequences of a purified mind will follow you like your own shadow. No one can do more for you than your own purified mind. No parent, no relative, no friend, no one. A well-disciplined mind brings happiness. And so meditation is intended to purify the mind. Not in like a moralistic sense, but in a way where the mind becomes free of obstruction, judgment, and negativity. So let's do a little bit of mindfulness meditation now. This will be our first guided practice, and I'll guide you through it. I'll talk through it, so that not like the first one. And so we'll just find our seat, or we can lie down. Just be comfortable and alert. So this combination of solidity and ease at the same time. for an awakeness. And again, you can bring a little softness to your eyes, maybe even close the eyes if you like to. Again, let's take just a few deeper breaths. I won't guide you through it. Just big, open breaths, long, complete exhales. This is a really nice way to just bring the mind back to the body. Do it whenever you want to, throughout your day, throughout the rest of this practice. It's always a nice way to calm the nervous system and just to settle back into the body. And we just begin by drawing attention to the breath itself. Not in like a super rigid way. We want to soften around the breath. And so we feel the body, we're in the environment, and we just include the breath. We include the breath at center. And so the breath is there and it's natural. And we'll just be with the breath here for the first part. This is always how I start my practice. Practice every day, and I always start with the breath. It's like home. Just notice all the aspects of the breath. How you feel it, where you feel it. Where is the predominant sensation? Could be the tip of the nose, the nostrils, the back of the throat, maybe the rising and falling of the chest. And wherever you feel predominance of physical sensation, just hold your attention there. Just be with it. We call this mindfulness of the breath. And we ride the breath, but we're also aware of any tension in the body. We're not trying to exclude anything. We're just placing the breath at the center. And then let's broaden this out a bit. So the breath is like our base. It's a place we can always come back to. With any meditation, we always have the breath as our base. But here now, we'll start to broaden it out a bit, and just include the whole body now. And so the physical sensations of the body. So we're mindful of the physical sensations of the body. So you might notice little tensions in places, little wiggling, pleasant and unpleasant sensation. It's all good, nothing bad. We're just noticing. You want to get away from good or bad. When the attention leaves, not if, but when the attention starts to get carried away by a thought or a plan or something on your to-do list, you just come back to the sensations using gentleness, ease, non-judgment, even a sense of joy that you're noticing the mind leaving and that you can bring it back. Notice all aspects of the body. You can even to your consciousness through. So the back body, perhaps, the back, the head, spine, bones, skin, organs, everything. The blood pumping, heart beating, toes, the fingers, teeth, it's everything. Okay, we're not looking for anything in particular, and if we get bored, that means we're looking. Boredom isn't a state, really. It's a judgment. It's a view. It's commentary. Now we're going to broaden it out even a little bit more. So we got the breath, we got the body, and now we'll just first begin to notice the contact of the environment with the body. So you might notice the air touching the skin, the clothing touching the skin, slight movement of air, and then we just expand out. So taking in the whole environment, just opening up the senses, so receiving sound, receiving sight. Even if your eyes are closed, you can still see light and maybe patterns behind the eyes. touch, all the senses wide open, even including the mind. So it's sort of wide open here. Just experiencing without attempting to manipulate. Breath is our base. You can always come back to the breath. And we'll just close it all back down. Just come back to just the breathing again. Breath at the very center. Simple in, simple out. Mind riding the breath. Softly open your eyes. Take a few deeper breaths. Roll the shoulders. Take a little stretch if you need. Cool. So that's just a basic mindfulness meditation where we started with a fairly tight container with the breath. And then we broaden it out a bit. to the body, and then just include the environment, and then we come back to the breath. It's a really nice way to practice. And so we start with something simple, and then we start to include more, never excluding. Sometimes we think of the breath practice as I'm only on the breath and everything else I have to ignore, which that is a type of practice called concentration practice or samadhi practice. But that's not really mindfulness practice. So we're inclusive. So the breath at the center, the body's at the center, the environment's at the center, and then everything is just kind of open, and then we come back to the breath. And so that simple practice is something that you can do formally every day. I mean, it's so helpful. But something else you might find valuable is to just use it throughout your day. I mean, it can take as little time as a few seconds to, it could be a half hour practice. And so maybe, we're not going to work right now, but if you were, you get in your car and you take a moment to feel your breath. You take a moment to feel your body, the ground. You take a moment to feel the environment, and then you're off. Or even throughout your day when you're working or you're doing domestic things or whatever, you just take a moment here and there. You just drop in these mindfulness moments throughout your day. And that's a super effective way to practice. The Tibetans, who are master meditators, not all of them, but they were such an isolated culture that they developed really intricate spiritual practices, and it was pervasive throughout the whole population. But Tibetan masters often say that little moments often are better than one large period of time at one time. So in other words, it's better to just take a few seconds throughout the day, like tiny mindfulness moments throughout the day, rather than to have like an hour-long meditation in the morning. Because again, what we're trying to do is infuse the practice into our life. We're not just trying to become really good meditators. And so good meditation practice is ultra, ultra, ultra practical. We want it to affect our lives, our relationships, our work, our relationship with ourselves, everything. That was a nice basic meditation. If you want me, I have this written out, and I've recorded myself doing this meditation. If you want that, I can email you. I think if you give me an email or contact Modo, or you can go to my website, which is just adamstonebreaker.com, and it's on there. I'm constantly adding stuff to that website too. So that's the basic mindfulness meditation practice. And then I want to move it more into the compassion practice, because the mindfulness practice naturally leads into compassion practice. And the compassion practice is ultra, ultra helpful, especially now, these times when we, that are really difficult. It's just hard. There's all kinds of upheaval and uncertainties, and we can internalize that. And so it's really super important that we start to cultivate compassion for everything around us, but really for ourselves. Because again, we can internalize this. And the idea of compassion practice is it's broadening, it's creating a large container for us to hold all of these things that are coming at us. We hear the news every day of just kind of really unsettling things. And if we're not prepared for that, if our container is very small, then it's difficult to handle. The Buddha talked about building capacity in this way. He talked about, if you take, let's say a tablespoon of salt and you put it into tiny vessel of water and you stirred it up and you drank it, the water would be very, very salty. And so the salt affects the water in a great way. But if you were to put that same amount of salt into the Ganges, and back in Buddha's day, it was clean and clear and beautiful, into the Ganges, you wouldn't even notice it because the capacity is so big. And so it doesn't affect it at all. And so we're building a capacity in our hearts to be able to handle anything that can come at us. There's a quote in this book that I really like. It's a little bit long, but it's good. This book's great. It's just called Mindfulness in Plain English by Bhante Gunaratana. And it's super good if you want just a basic mindfulness. And he's very blunt and clear. And he says this. He says, meditation is called the great teacher. It is the cleansing crucible fire that works slowly but surely through understanding. And so meditation is a gradual process. It's not like we go through the meditation drive-through and pick up what we need and then we move on and we're better. It's not like that. It builds over time. Like anything worth building, it just takes time. The greater your understanding, the more flexible and tolerant, the more compassionate you can be. You become like a perfect parent or an ideal teacher. You are ready to forgive and forget. You feel love toward others because you understand them. And you understand others because you have understood yourself. And so we can sometimes think of practicing for ourselves as a selfish act, but it's really not at all. It's like the most unselfish act. The best thing that we can offer to others is the best version of ourselves. And so our self-improvement project is not for ourselves, it's for others. And that's what makes it much more effective. You've looked deeply inside and seen self-illusion and your human failings, seen your own humanity and learned to forgive and to love. When you have learned compassion for yourself, compassion for others is automatic. An accomplished meditator has achieved a profound understanding of life, and he or she inevitably relates to the world with a deep, uncritical love. And so mindfulness gradually, or it naturally leads into compassion. It just sort of happens. You start to develop these skills, and it just bends toward that direction. And there are specific meditation practices that we can take on. And so compassion, what is it exactly? There's sometimes some misunderstandings about it, and so we think of empathy and pity and things like this, but pity is like a very selfish attitude. It's like a hierarchical attitude. We're not seeing everybody as equals when we're pitying somebody. We're just saying like poor them. We might feel bad for them, but we're coming from this place of like higher standing, sort of like, oh, poor you. Empathy is not negative. It's like empathy is we're feeling for the other person. We can really relate to their suffering. We can feel bad for them. Maybe we've gone through something similar or the exact same thing, and we can feel bad. The downside to empathy is that it's not regenerative. It can drain us. And so there's lots of studies that have been done with nurses where they're really empathetic, and they get very, very drained to the point where they just start to detach. And so maybe you've met a detached nurse if you've ever had a loved one in the hospital. They just kind of come in, do the thing, and leave. There's no ever a connection, because if they were to connect, they would become drained or hurt too much. They just can't handle it anymore. Compassion is different. Compassion is empathy. It's suffering with somebody, understanding somebody's suffering. But then there's an action component to it as well. This action component where we're actively trying to relieve somebody's suffering is regenerative. I mentioned nurses before. There's a lot of compassion study with nurses where they're teaching compassion skills to nurses, and they're finding that the nurses become much happier. They're creating much more connection, and there's a regenerative aspect to it. They're not getting drained. Their resources, their inner resources are constantly building back up. They still feel, but through that action orientation, that desire to relieve somebody's suffering, that becomes the medicine for the burnout. And so there's been lots of success with compassion. Compassion is sort of like the new mindfulness. So mindfulness hit this, it was a huge wave. But what they've found is that mindfulness just isn't enough. It can become robotic and without soul. And so we need that extra heart in there. And so compassion is starting to come in to sort of make up that extra ground. And so compassion and mindfulness together it's just a really good combination. And it's an ancient combination. The Buddha talked about it 2,500 years ago and taught it. So it just with many things, the ancient ways are becoming are being affirmed every day. And so the way we do this is, we're getting low on time, we use specific phrases toward people. So maybe you've done something like loving kindness practice. It's very similar to that. Loving kindness is love that we send to people. So loving kindness, you may have heard it as metta. When loving kindness meets suffering, it becomes compassion. Sorry, I just got a question here. I want to answer it. Oh, so the difference between compassion and empathy. Empathy is feeling. Empathy and compassion are similar in the sense that with both, we're feeling the person's suffering, or we're suffering with. That's compassion means to suffer with. Empathy means to suffer with. The difference between empathy and compassion is empathy doesn't have the action component. Compassion, in its definition, is empathy plus action. And so the action would be the attempt or the desire to relieve the person's suffering. And so that's the action, that's the difference. With empathy, it just drains and drains and drains and drains. With compassion, it's regenerative, because there is that desire, and it's even a little bit more subtle. It's really about intention. With compassion, the intention is to relieve the suffering. With empathy, the intention, whether conscious or unconscious, is just to feel the pain or to empathize with. The intention with compassion is different. The intention with compassion is to work to relieve the suffering. So that's the difference. Another comment, question here. Is there an assessment for compassion, some tool that will help a person recognize the qualities of compassion in themselves? There's an energetic component. Again, like with compassion, you're not as drained. And when you, like I said, with the nurses, that with the being over empathetic, it becomes so tiresome that there begins to be a detachment with the person. Like it becomes a chore there's many, I keep saying nurses just because those are the studies that I've read. Many nurses leave the field because it just becomes so draining and so hard, especially with really empathetic people. But through that little switch of intention of just, can I work to relieve the person's suffering? I think that might be a measure that could be measurable. Is there the desire to relieve the person's suffering? So I don't know what that noise was. Hopefully that helps. If you have any more questions, let me write them here, or we can email later or something. Oh, Paul Bloom, yes. I like him. Awesome. Somebody says check out Against Empathy by Paul Bloom. Yeah, I've listened to a lot of Paul Bloom. I really like what he has to say. I haven't read that book, but I've been listening to him lately. Well, let's do a little bit of compassion practice. See if there's are there any more questions? Anything that anybody, or comments from anybody? And really, my intention here, the secret intention or motive here, is to do self-compassion, because now it's just so important that we do that. But I'll work into it in a way that's gentle. So I was going to do some yoga postures with this, but do you want to do that? Okay, I'll just do them, and if you want to participate, you can. You don't have to. Just going to do a couple of yin postures. We'll start seated, and how about if you want to, we'll start seated, and then let's come into a simple butterfly posture. This is just something that I like to do. You don't have to do it, but I like to do it. My teacher does it like this as well. So if you come into a butterfly posture, so the soles of the feet together, the heels are a good distance away, and then you just fold over the legs. Or just stay in a seat. It's perfectly fine. And just connect with your breath. So we always connect with mindfulness first. Connect with the breathing. And you can soften your eyes. Yeah. And I want you to bring to mind someone who you love, or who is like a good example of love. When you see this person, or hear their voice, or think of them, it brings a smile to your face. It brings a sense of love to your heart. And this can be somebody who you're close to, that you know. It could also be somebody that you don't know, that you admire a whole lot. It could also be pets. Sometimes the animals have, mine are coming around now. Animals have even a more extra special place than humans for some people. So let's bring that being to mind. Maybe you even picture them sitting in front of you, and you just You're just kind of smiling with each other and connecting at a heart level. Like you feel the emanation of the love. So our window in is with loving kindness. And so we were feeling this love for the person. And again, connecting at a heart level, it could even be like a physical, or like a light, like an emanation of light coming off of your heart towards the other person. However creative you want to be, or maybe it's just maybe you can conjure the feeling connection. And sometimes visuals are nice, but and from the depths of this love, from this deepest heart, you just say, may you be happy. You say it to yourself, may you be free from suffering. And as you say these phrases, imagine the person receiving or the animal receiving that and being moved by it. May you find peace and a joy. So may you be happy. May you be free from suffering. May you find peace and joy. The phrases are less important than the actual feeling, and so the intention of feeling, that's what we want to give. Yeah. Meaning behind. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. May you find peace and joy. So that's just loving kindness, sending loving kindness to this person. In this frame, or in your butterfly pose, you can begin to come out and just sit up. Stay in this loving kindness, keeping the person or the animal in mind. And if you want to continue in postures, you can just come forward all the way down to your belly and come into a Sphinx posture. So you would just come out to your belly and bring the elbows underneath the shoulders and just, it's a nice back bend. Very simple. This is nice too because the heart's open, or spread open, spread out. Settling in, staying in this space of loving kindness that we're alchemizing together with this person. And then we'll move into the compassion part of this. So we still have this person with us. And perhaps the person you're thinking of is a loved one. maybe you can remember a time when they were suffering or were going through a difficult time. Physical, emotional, financial, really anything. Or you can simply connect with your desire for them, this person or animal, to not suffer. Even the thought of it, notice what that does in that heart space. It's not easy to think about, and it shouldn't be. And how deeply you might desire, again, for this person not to suffer. And you use phrases again. So again, the phrases just are meant to just pull up compassion. So may you be free from suffering. May you be free from pain and fear. May you find peace and joy. And again, they're receiving this. Maybe this person's even holding or touching their heart or putting their hands over their heart. Or maybe you're doing this too. It's a nice way to connect with the heart. May you be free from suffering. May you be free from pain and fear. May you find peace and joy. May you be free from suffering. Notice how this feels. Pulling up that desire. May you be free from pain and fear. May you find peace and joy. Just hold this. If you're in your Sphinx posture, come down flat. Make a little pillow with your arms and just lie there for a moment. Everyone else will just stay in the seat. If you're in the Sphinx posture, just come back to your seat. And we're gonna end our time with this loving this person that we love, or this animal that we love. And you might just picture yourself bowing to this person, or maybe embracing them, hugging. And maybe they just sit off to the side, or perhaps they walk away. But still holding that deep, broad, deep sense of love and compassion. Now we want to maintain this. And now we want to bring forth ourself. The way I like to often do this is just to see myself sitting across from me, just like with the other person. Or perhaps you can just direct this directly to yourself. Different minds work in different ways. And notice what happens if when you would think of yourself like this. Sometimes there's an automatic contraction. This is why we don't start with ourselves. But just humor me and bring that broad heart back up. Connect with yourself at a heart level, looking over yourself. Perhaps you're smiling. And from the depths of your compassion, from the depths of your love, from this very broad place, may I be free from suffering. May I be safe. May I find peace. Again, just give this to yourself. May I be free from suffering. May I be safe. May I find peace. May I be free from suffering. May I be safe. May I find peace. And maybe hold your heart or connect through visualization. Feel the love, the compassion, your own desire to not see yourself suffer, emanating through the whole body. Knowing that this capacity for compassion can grow infinitely. I want to stay with this just for another minute. And the phrases aren't as important as the feeling. Strong desire to relieve the suffering. Let's just let ourselves go now, just like we did before with the person that we love. Unless you want to stay with it, for sure you can. You might embrace yourself in your mind, hug yourself, or even hug yourself now physically. That could be therapeutic and helpful. Maybe a little silly, but still it's good to be silly. Let's come back to our breathing in and out. Take a big breath and let it go. Shrug the shoulders a few times. Move and wiggle. And then stretch, open. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for being here and for coming to your mat, coming to the screen, and courageously participating in something that I've found extremely valuable. Not just me. There's thousands and thousands and millions of people over the years that have benefited from these practices, and it's such an honor to be able to share them with you. And again, if you have any more questions, you can email me or contact me on my website. It's just my name.com. And I'll, if anybody has any questions here now or wants to discuss something or has a comment or whatever, you can chat or raise your hand. I can unmute you and you can talk and we can talk or whatever. Or you can just leave. So again, thank you all so much.